They're unaware of the human elements at work in their work situation, and they're just projecting a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be there and creating problems for everybody. So it's a growth imperative for companies to invest in equipping their leaders.
Welcome back to another episode of The Leader Within. Today, I'm excited to introduce Sylvana Rochet, an executive and transition coach who partners with visionary founders and leaders to drive meaningful organizational change. Her multicultural heritage, spanning the USA, France, and Colombia, enables her to bring unique insights in navigating complex transitions while bridging cultural divides. Given her experience, I'm excited to have her share her insights with you. Well, welcome, Sylvana. I'm excited to hear a story that has just fundamentally influenced how you lead yourself and others.
Angela, hi. I'm super pumped to be here. Let's get right into it. So the story that I would say has shaped the trajectory of my career has been something that started when I had my first job. At age 15, as a young person working at a movie theater selling popcorn, and that followed me through my years waitressing and bartending while I was in university, and then followed me through my years entering, professional life post-uni. And one of the things that I got to understand once I became a boss of people was that all of those bad bosses that I had had before were actually not bad people. They just hadn't been trained. Because actually being a leader is really hard. It's a set of skills that most of us never got in school or when we start our first job and get put in a management position somewhere, somehow. So I got this realization that bad bosses are not bad people. They're just severely undertrained. And most people with the leadership role are just fumbling around, being terrible at it, creating a lot of drama because they're trying to do their best, but they just aren't equipped to do their best as leaders. So what do I mean with this? What are the consequences of bad bosses? We're talking about the number one reason of people quitting their jobs in the US at least is because they're unhappy with their boss. When they don't quit, they will stay and quiet quit, which is worse than having them leave because now you're paying them a salary. So as a boss, you end up thinking, oh, I hire geniuses and I fire idiots without realizing that you as the leader are perhaps a big part of the problem. What else? Bad leadership creates a lot of drama. I've worked in so many places and I've seen people creating unnecessary conflict and friction because we have peers that are unaware of their own internal psychology. They're unaware of the human elements at work in their work situation. And they're just projecting a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be there and creating problems for everybody. So it's a growth imperative for companies to invest in equipping their leaders because we think about it as a soft skill, but it's critical. I have seen this as a coach over and over, and I'm not joking when I say that unconscious leadership can really tank your company. It can go that far. So maybe not overnight, but it will be death by 1,000 cuts. So back to my story. I was working in public health programs around the world, and it didn't matter whether I was in, Ethiopia or in a boardroom in Silicon Valley or just with a public health organization in Latin America somewhere. I saw the same kinds of things over and over, which was bad leadership thwarting maybe the technology, a great strategy, a great team, etc. So this is what led me to basically make it my life's mission to get as much information out there and as many people who are in leadership roles to get equipped on how to become a great leader, like coming from a place of not judging them, of just really understanding, hey, you are the founder of this company. You have suddenly become the CEO because of the circumstances at hand here. And yeah, you're not equipped to be a leader because you haven't been trained to do this. These are trainable, they're learnable skills. The trick is you have to put them into place and you have to practice them.
I appreciate that story, and I'm going to put a pin in what you found has helped leaders because I want to dive a little bit into if you could turn back and give yourself advice based on all the data points that you've now gathered working with your clients and say, hey, Sylvana, if you're starting out in your leadership journey, I want to give you this one piece of advice for you to think about as you continue on your leadership journey. What would that piece of advice be?
It would be, don't stop at just having the right strategy, the right technology, and the right budget and the right implementation. It goes beyond that. Your people are your most important technology, actually. And they are the ones you have to focus on. They're the ones you have to spend time, energy, money on in order to have them function at the highest level possible. I think when I was younger, I'm talking my first leadership roles in my mid 20s, I really wanted to prove that I was very smart and that I had the strategy and that I had done my research and that I had the perfect plan and that I knew how to execute. Meanwhile, I'm forgetting that there's 7 people coming along with me on this journey, right? And I'm not paying as much attention to, are they equipped? Do they have what they need in order to execute this strategy that I so beautifully put together, right? So I would say that's the number one lesson I would teach myself back in time. I learned it quickly enough because it was starting to be painful, but I see people who are 45 and who have been leading for a while who are still struggling with this. So the earlier you can learn it, the better.
Something that I recently heard over and over again is most leaders have beautiful strategies, but where things fall apart sometimes is the implementation and the execution part. And I'm curious for you because leaders have a lot of pressure on their shoulders. Leading people, like you said, is not easy because there's a lot of gray within that. So, are there any questions that you encourage folks to think about that's like, hey, let's pause for a second and think about the implications if you power through this beautiful strategy, but not think about the implementation and execution piece and bringing your people along with you? What would that pause or that question be that you would pose to them?
This is probably where I bring in what I call my 3 C's. And so they are this. The 3 C's that I work with are clarity, curiosity, and courage. And I will pause and say to somebody, okay, you've got your plan, you're implementing it. Things are not going according to plan. People are missing deadlines, balls are being dropped, the product's not shipping on time, right? We're having problems. And I bring in my 3 C's and I say, clarity. Have you been crystal clear on what success looks like? Have you been crystal clear on what the deadlines are for everybody? Have you been crystal clear on the expectations? Have you been crystal clear yourself on what your people need and what they're missing and what they still need in order to make this work, right? So all of that. So we check on have we been crystal clear on all aspects of all things on all sides. Often you'll see that even at that first step, oh, well, I did give an original deadline and then it changed over time. And then I just kind of said to people, oh, let's kind of do it over the summer, but I didn't really give them a date. But now I'm disappointed because the product is quote unquote late, is being shipped late, right? So that's what I mean. This happens all the time with very smart, very professional people. So that's number one, it's clarity. Number two, I'm going to bring in the curiosity. Okay, so if what you're doing isn't working, how you're implementing and how you're executing, you're hitting bumps in the road. Let's get curious, right? Let's not say, oh, we already tried that, it didn't work. Let's get curious about what truly happened. Where can we pinpoint what is happening? Let's get curious about, is there somebody else who can do this better than I can? Let's get curious about maybe this team shouldn't own that. Maybe that team over there should own this, right? So let's get curious about what needs to change, why things aren't working, not just it's not working and it sucks, but really get curious about what's happening. And then the courage. I tell people all the time, sometimes the right thing that you're going to have to do is going to feel not good, or it's going to feel like a departure from what you've done, or some people might not be happy with it at first. And you need to build up the courage to make those tough decisions. Sometimes people just need a little encouragement to say, you need to find the courage to do this. You got to go ahead and do it. It's going to be tough, but you have it. You can do it.
You painted that so beautifully. I chuckle a little bit when you talked about that clarity piece and a boss saying, well, it's late or whatever it may be. It's like, well, if the expectations weren't clear, is it actually late? And then as you pose some of these questions for leaders to consider, I think it's also the flip where you as a team member or someone reporting to them can start thinking about these questions too. Because I think through these behaviors and interactions with your leaders, you start understanding, okay, what is it that they probably will continue to look from me and how do I gain that clarity? And if I don't know what I don't know, throw it out there. I can't ask you something if I don't know what's missing. It's definitely going to be a continuous dialogue. There's the piece where there's externally leading folks, but how about the leader within? Because sometimes things get really murky and we all know that our personal lives and our work lives are intertwined. How do you effectively lead the leader within?
For me, it's been a very long journey. I've done a lot of personal work So I do practice what I preach to my clients because I've been down that road. You know, I haven't been a CEO, but I have been leading a program where I had a whole team and budget and a program to deliver and blah blah blah. Um, so I've done a lot of work on this, and I think of it like an iceberg. When you see an iceberg, when you're out at sea, what you're seeing is only, they say it's only the top 10%, right? But there's a whole 90% under there. And when people see me, they see somebody who's happy in her own skin, who's grounded, who's comfortable with who she is, and they may assume that that's in my nature or that's just how I was born or it's innate, right? They're seeing the tip of the iceberg. And what they don't realize is that that took a lot of work for me to get to a place where I operate with a clear mind every day. And I take my time to just kind of think through things and make decisions, etc. So that is all fed by the 90% that's under it, which is doing that personal development work, taking time to think before I act, not acting from a place of fear or a knee jerk reaction. Um, that can even have to do with, healing parts of myself or of my ego. I mean, like this is one of the things that people miss. Like when I talk to CEOs and founders, I tell them, we are going to talk about your childhood. We're going to talk about the unhealed parts of yourself. We're going to talk about parts of your ego that are not very noble. They're kind of dark and not very pretty. But guess what? They are showing up when you get triggered by something at work. They're here, right? So all of that under part of the iceberg is how you nourish that leader within. It's doing all of that personal work on unpacking your baggage. You got to have your therapist, you got to have your mentors, you got to have your advisors, your coaches, all of that for you to get to really understand your internal psychology so that that 10% that you're showing to the world when you're interacting with your teams, when you're interacting with investors, when you are getting triggered by something that happened with your co-founder, you don't have that dark, really reactive part of yourself showing up to the party. You have a part of yourself that has been consciously worked on so that you can bring your best to the table.
I have so much respect for you that you do that because I will forever keep my psychologist gainfully employed and any coaches that I need along the way because sometimes we either can be our own biggest critic or we get into this mode where we don't actually realize our blind spots and it takes folks that we trust to objectively be able to say, hey, have you considered this? And like you said, you don't know how something that happened a few years ago impacts how you operate now. So to have a professional walk you through that, it takes courage to get through that work. So I'm curious for you, is there a routine or a practice that you've now nailed down where you're like, all right, okay, every day I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes or every day I'm going to go like walk for whatever it may be that has helped you have that clear mind and effectively lead the leader within?
There's a lot that I do, I will admit, and now it doesn't take as much quote unquote time as it used to because I just kind of have it down to routine and I know where to you have to work with your schedule, right? I'm a mom of two now. I have my work right outside the home. So I don't do like the 1 hour long morning routine that I used to do before I had children. But guess what? I do get up early and do my 20 minutes of yoga at home in my living room. I make sure that I get outside several times a day, every day. Moving your body is the best thing you can do to shake up the energy in your head, not just your body. Again, this is really for any leader out there, have the awareness that you sitting in front of a computer for 8, 10 hours a day is not doing anybody any favors. It's not just a physical thing. Your brain will be better for having fresh oxygen, for having your body move, your circulation, right? All of that. Also, a lot of the people I work with don't pay attention to how they eat. Bad sleep habits, bad eating habits. Again, this is super important. It's a foundation. Your body, your mind, they are machines that need to be fed the right fuel. So eat foods that are good for you. If you need to pay somebody to do that, a delivery service that delivers like really healthy meals to you every day, do that because it is worth every penny. So for me, the practices are, it's not, you have to do an hour-long morning routine or the green smoothie in this way. It's think about the different aspects of your whole being, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, meta, whatever, and have little practices that you do at different times of the day, right? There's stuff that I do at night before I go to bed after I've put my children to bed because that's the only time I have time to do it. But have little practices throughout the day that are routine, that you do consistently for yourself, that are nourishing all of the pieces of your being, right? So that the machine can run well. I have a happiness coach. Her name is Steph, and she says happiness is a habit. And by that, she means it's all of these little practices. I know that I start to unravel after day 3 if I haven't done my yoga, haven't had good foods, haven't slept well, right? Like I'm not going to be a happy person. I am not going to be the person you want to be around. Why? Because I'm not taking care of myself. So that's really, really one of the foundational pieces, I would say.
What a great reminder of like each day incrementally what you are able to do is going to look a little bit different, but you still want to do it every day. For example, like you can't do an hour today, maybe tomorrow's 10 minutes, but at least you're flexing that muscle. And then eventually it's just going to kick in and you're going to nourish yourself. I'm going to switch gears now because I want to focus more on just that leadership effectiveness and the unnecessary drama that you've noticed that folks bring into the workplace. And I want to start with a story. So I remember I was working in a place once where this colleague and and I very rarely have this, but we just, for some reason, didn't click. And then eventually I found out that the colleague was projecting that I was so similar to their spouse and with
Oh.
whatever that was happening in their home. And after again, a series of interactions where I'm like, I've never had this with anyone before, but for them to come off like this strongly with me, and they outright admit it, you know what? I think I realize, Angela, it's because I'm projecting because you and my spouse are so similar and we're just going through some things. I was like, thank you for your honesty, but holy shit, like I didn't realize I had to carry that, right? So tying that into what you have observed in the workplace, have you noticed that there are certain triggers that people just start bringing these unnecessary dramas into the workplace?
For sure. People's personal history shapes how they show up, and especially how they show up when they're triggered. Like a leader who says, "This is how I am in my leadership," you have to ask them the flip question and say, "Okay, so how do you show up in your leadership when you're triggered?" And that's a very different answer, right? So our triggers usually come from things that are in the past, things that have happened to us before, bad experiences we've had with people. Just kind of like you've met those people that, maybe they're on the dating scene and they're like, oh, I don't trust anybody anymore. And because once somebody cheated on me and it broke my heart, right? And so I'll see this sometimes with my clients where they'll say, oh, with my new CTO, I'm having some trust issues because we had something happen with the prior CTO, right? So people will bring in baggage from the past, could be as far back as childhood, it could be as far back as last year with your old CTO without realizing it. And until they sit in a room with somebody who is trained to help them develop that self awareness of where those triggers are coming from and why those triggers are triggers, they will go on behaving that way for as long as they can. So it's really, really key. And it's such a gift that people can give themselves to take that time, whether it's to do it with someone or do it on their own, right? Like get a book, learn to do this process for yourself, but really understanding, why do I get triggered in this way with this type of situation? The other thing that people will see sometimes, and this can be a clue, that there's something for you to look at, right? So if you keep having a similar kind of situation, a similar kind of breakdown, but with a different face, it's a different person. It happened at your old job and it's happening at this job again, or it happened with a different person, right? And it keeps happening, kind of a very eerily similar situation. It's usually going to have to do with your own baggage. There's something there that's hidden from your view, that's in your blind spot, that keeps showing up, right?
I'm gonna click into that piece then because it's like you sometimes see these folks going out and about, and especially if they're a leader in the organization, it can be a little awkward to be like, "Hey, have you reconsidered maybe not approaching it that way?" Right? And then because no one has ever called them in or called them out for it, they just continue. So if you've worked with a leader who's said like, hey, Sylvana, my leadership effectiveness is being impacted because of this individual who's going around like this, is there a piece of advice that you'd offer them to be like, hey, model the behavior that you expect, and hopefully through time you gain the trust to have these courageous conversations? What does that even look like?
Oh, I'm a big fan of asking people for permission to share something delicate with them. So think of it as you're going to give this person some observations and some thoughts of how your interactions have been going. I tell people don't use the F word. Don't say feedback. People get so nervous and so triggered and so when somebody says, "Hey, I have some feedback I'd like to share with you about how you've been showing up," or whatever. So stay away from the F word. And it doesn't matter if this person is your boss or whoever they are. You may want to approach them and say, "Hey, I've been noticing some friction in our interactions lately. I would love to have a conversation with you and hear what your experience of that has been. And maybe we have some observations and thoughts to share with one another. And hopefully that will bring us to a place of better understanding. And maybe we can even learn to work together better. What do you think?" So you don't ever want to go to someone and say, "Hey, I have some feedback for you. When can I give it to you?" So you always say, "What do you think? How would you feel about having that conversation?" It's like how in vampire movies you have to ask, the vampire has to ask before they go into someone's house, otherwise they melt or disintegrate or something. This is the same thing. You have to ask the person, ask for their permission, ask for them to invite you in once you've said, "Here's what I'd like to talk about. What do you think? Does that sound like something you'd like to do?" And then you wait for them to give you your yes. It's like consent, right? And then you can have that conversation.
Okay, and I like that you said, "What do you think?" instead of "Would you like to?" Because "Would you like to?" is a yes or no question
Yes.
versus "What do you think?" allows you
How does
to
that
either
sound?
get to the yes or you can unpack the objection that is stopping them from having that conversation. And then through that, you guide the conversation accordingly, or you learn that, hey, maybe this is just not a good time, and that's why it allows you to navigate accordingly. So as we slowly wrap up our conversation, I want to understand, like, what's the first thing that comes to mind when I ask, what do you think it takes to unleash the potential of individuals and organizations?
It's such a big topic. To me, it always comes back to the right leadership, to the right model, to the right inspiration, right? The leader is all those things. The leader is the model, the leader is their inspiration. If there's any CEOs out there listening to us today or founders, or if you're the boss of anything and you think that it's HR's job to unleash the potential of your people, I'm here to tell you, you are in for a rude awakening. Because even HR is taking their cues from you, the boss, right? So it's your job to set the tone for the culture. It's your job to show what is okay and what is not okay. And not just by putting it down in a manual, but by really showing who gets rewarded for what kinds of behaviors, right? So you're setting the tone, you're modeling things, you're giving people the inspiration, you're giving people the motivation. And I can hear people already saying that's too much for one person. Yeah, that's why being the boss is a big job. And then you get help, right? You have to have your champions. I think, I'm saying a lot of like, it's the boss's job to do all of these things. And you have to surround yourself with your champions. And these are the people who are aligned with you. They are crystal clear on what you're modeling and what you're inspiring people towards and what you're motivating people for. They're crystal clear on all that. And they're like helping you amplify and magnify what you have to give. But you are the one giving the tone. It's not HR's job. HR will help you amplify and magnify what you've got to give and what you have to say and where you want things to go. So it takes really solid leadership, really clear leadership, and it takes having the right people around you to help you amplify and magnify that.
Say it louder for the people in the back of the room,
Mm.
because at the end of the day, cultural change, anything like that, it takes consistent, intentional effort and it takes a community around you. So I love that you called that out. And so my last question to you is, what is one thing that's top of mind for you, whether it's something that we can celebrate with you or potentially help you with?
Well, I am living in France these days. I've been here for the past 2 years after having lived in California for quite some time, in New York City before that. Something that's top of mind for me right now, now that I've got my family settled in, my kids speak French, my husband somewhat speaks French, we're, just feeling more grounded. Top of mind for me is I want to meet really cool people here in Europe who are doing interesting, amazing things, just because I want more friends and I want to have more people in my circle to, build a future with and do cool things with and have a good laugh with too.
Congrats on getting settled in France with your family. And thank you so much for sharing your insights and your stories today. I really appreciate you. And to everyone else that's tuned into another episode, thank you so much for your time and attention. It means more to me than you'll know. And I can't wait to stay in touch with you on my next episode. Till then, stay safe.